Hi there. Just a video re the Clacton upcoming Clacton by-election and the case of Count Binface standing as a candidate. Now, at the moment, Count Binface is probably the most high-profile candidate standing against Nigel Farage, and it looks like there's a possibility of a lot of kind of anti-Nigel Farage um, voters coalescing around him and possibly causing a massive upset. There are a couple of other people who've announced their standing. Um, but the nominations haven't closed yet, so maybe there'd be a few others. But at the moment, it looks like Count Binface will be the most kind of high profile and challenger to Nigel Farage. In this video, I'm just going to tell you the reasons why him standing is really bad for democracy and really two fingers up at working men and women across the country. So there's a number of issues. First issue is the kind of idea behind someone dressing up, um, having a fake name, dressing up, attention seeking. Number two, the principle behind whether someone behind a mask with a different name, with policies they know are realistic, um, standing is good for democracy. Next, the idea about him being an establishment candidate in terms of his background and the people who support him. And then also the issue of politics not really being a joke for working people, not a kind of jape for people who went to Oxbridge. And then lastly, I just want to look at the issue of this being a golden opportunity, given the fact that the main parties aren't standing, for someone to actually stand and raise important issues, maybe issues for Clacton, but also issues nationwide. So, number one, I do have issues with people who dress up and give like a different name when standing for elections. There's something of a kind of attention seeker about them, and there's also a kind of issue of them seeking validation in some way. That's kind of it's like a psychological analysis, but it is an issue. It's not that's not the issue why I don't think he should stand, but that is an issue. Most importantly, there is the principle of someone standing with a different name under a mask, um, talking about policies that he cannot actually deliver, knowingly cannot deliver, um, and the fact that if he were to get elected, he would revert back to kind of centrist establishment type politics, the type of politics that people in Clacton don't want and haven't wanted. So in a way, it's a bit being a bit tricky, I would say. I use my words carefully, but there's a bit of being a bit tricky there. Personally, I find that type of approach sinister. That's my opinion. I'm not saying it is. I think it's sinister. Right. So if you're standing for an election, you should stand on principles that you actually believe in, and you should stand as yourself. That should be the way you stand in an election. What's happening here is the opposite of that, and it's not right. Now, there's an issue with the fact that Count Binface has an inverted commas amusing name, is actually really an establishment figure. So this is a guy who went to Oxbridge and did classics. You can't really get much more establishment than that, actually. Um, on top of that, he worked for the BBC and worked making programs, kind of centre left politics, kind of satirical comedies for the BBC. Um, and again, you can't get much more establishment than that. I mean, the kind of comedy programs you get on the BBC are all centre left, kind of centre left metropolitan type comedy, and probably kind of a similar standard to Private Eye in a sense where it's kind of an acceptable um, kind of satire. It's not like Charlie Hebdo, which is more biting and more kind of on the bone. This is kind of acceptable, um, kind of sneering type of comedy, which isn't really representative of the country as a whole, but is representative of a certain establishment view and establishment tastes. So he really is, in that sense, Mr. Establishment, disguised as, a joker. So that I don't like. He's not just someone who has come off the street. This is a bit of a laugh, and decided to do that for a bet with his mates. He has opinions. He has views. So why doesn't he give his own views and opinions? And that is something I find troubling. Right. So he's an establishment in those respects, but he's also an establishment in terms of the people who've endorsed him. Kemi Badenoch endorsed him. Um, the kind of green campaigner, environmental campaigner, Dale Vince, has offered to pay for his campaign. This is someone who made large donations to the Labour Party. So again, another kind of establishment figure. And if you look at the way he's been treated on, for instance, Newsnight or Times Radio, it's very different to the way they would treat another candidate. So he's kind of getting off scot free with any scrutiny, um, and really be given a chance, a real leg up to actually win this seat. So that is a bit that is bad, I would say. Also, if you look at it, he I was listening to Times Radio the other day. It was Ted Vasey, a guy, I think his name is Cranbrook. Apologies if it isn't, and a blonde woman who just giggled for 15 minutes, and it was like these guys were open in their support for Count Binface. I think they even said that he'd been on the program a few times, possibly presenting, but he'd been on the program a few times. So that really, you can't get more establishment than being backed by the leader of the Tories, backed by Labour donors, backed tacitly by the BBC and Times Radio, definitely backed by their presenters, who, um, and going to Oxbridge and doing classics. I mean, bloody hell. Um, it's impossible to find someone who's more establishment than that. So that's really bad. The really important point I'd like to make here is that politics isn't a jape, right? This isn't a jape. This isn't, um, for Sebastian from Brideshead to walk around with his teddy bear. These are real concerns that people have, and these are real issues that people face. People who aren't script writers for BBC sitcoms, people who don't work for Times Radio, people who aren't career politicians. People have things like bills to pay, care for elderly relatives, um, school, declining school standards, issues of violent crime in the area. These are really important issues. And if you go to your MP with these issues, and all he can do is sit down there as someone who is sane and as someone who um, has a degree in classics from Oxbridge, and just for him to tell you he's a spaceman, that's not really acceptable, especially given the fact that this guy will be on over 100 grand a year. So this is really sticking two fingers up at working men and women in the country, across the country, and anyone across the country. Um, it's a disdain that the establishment, not just politicians, but the political establishment as a whole, have for the people. I would say the other issue is the fact that Labour, Tory, Lib Dems aren't standing, Restore not standing, Greens not standing, does allow for someone to stand who wants to bring an issue to the fore, who wants to raise an issue, maybe in Clacton, but also nationwide, that is important. And this is a golden opportunity to do that. And all we get is this guy dressed as a dustbin. Now there is a guy there dressed as a fox, but at least he is talking about animal rights. So okay, he's dressed as a fox, but if you vote for him, he will raise awareness on those issues. So there's nothing untoward there. It's just he's dressed as a fox, but that is a kind of important issue he's raising. There's a party I don't know if they're going to stand now, but they were thinking of standing. It was a kind of pro-EU party wanted to rejoin the EU. Now again, that's an interesting issue. At least if they stood, people who were interested in that issue. I mean, I think we've heard enough about it over the years, but at least that's an actual issue that affects people. So it would be interesting if someone stood on a more kind of abstract issue that people don't really talk about or not talking about. I don't know. Um, the euthanasia, it's been debated in Parliament, abortion, the death penalty, selective schools. I don't know any of these issues. A kind of conscription, anything that's important. The war in Ukraine, any one of these issues would be interesting to have someone debate or talk about. Disestablishment of the Church of England, could be anything, but something real, where you're not treating people like absolute idiots, and getting them to um, kind of take part in a kind of your kind of attention seeking, validation seeking kind of a quest. It, there were some really important issues that would be great to discuss in the absence of these parties, but it looks like people have just decided not to, and to coalesce around someone dressed as a bin.